Ayo, considering going no contact with my bio father again. I, 24 years old, male, recently took a trip to my hometown with a friend with benefits 28 years old, male, to visit my father and best friend for a couple of days. Last year was quite challenging for me, and I faced significant emotional turmoil due to a breakup, job loss, and the deaths of both of my grandmothers. I was in a fragile state emotionally. I don't maintain regular contact with my father, but we communicated frequently during the breakup since he was one of the few people who knew about it while it was happening. Both my father and best friend urged me to return home. However, with my job search and the pressures of living alone with rent due, I didn't feel it was sensible to make the trip home, even though my best friend offered to cover travel costs. I expressed my concerns to them. They said they understood my situation, but strongly encouraged me to visit whenever I could. Recently, my hours at work decreased, which is typical for this time of year in my profession, and I found myself with plenty of free time. I have spent a lot of time with my friend with benefits and a respective group of friends to fill the time inexpensively. We frequently play Magic, The Gathering and Dungeons & Dragons, or we watch anime. Sometimes on Fridays, we enjoy a mixed drink while having a homemade dinner. About 2 weeks ago, I contacted my father to inform him that my hours had been cut and that I wanted to visit him during Super Bowl weekend with my friend with benefits. Unfortunately, a few days later, one of my rent checks bounced due to a system error at my apartment complex. I explained this to my father before I understood the reason for the bounce, and as a result, I didn't feel it was wise for me to take the trip that weekend. The following week, it appeared possible for my friend with benefits to get a day off work, Tuesday, so we rescheduled our tentative plans to visit from Sunday to Tuesday. I sent my father a text to let him know that, although it was last minute, we would be able to make it. He inquired about the duration of our stay and our departure time, and I provided him with the details. On the day of our departure, I texted him again to inform him we would leave that evening and arrive early in the morning. Around 4 a.m., he responded with a warning about potential bad weather on our drive and wished us luck. During our drive, we encountered some snow, and because we were near a large body of water, there was some wind blowing snow across the road intermittently. It was somewhat difficult to see, but we drove slowly and were prepared to pull over if necessary. We hit a small patch of black ice. Although we were driving cautiously, his car unfortunately lost traction on the icy spot. The vehicle slid about 10 feet off the road onto a mild incline, but there was no damage to the car or to us. Unfortunately, due to the hill and the fresh snow, the car could not regain traction. We called for a tow, waited about 45 minutes, and then got back on the road without issues. I shared all of this information with my father after we arrived at his house at around 5 o'clock a.m. He had been asleep until our arrival, so he wasn't awake worrying about the time difference. I decided to let him sleep and not disturb him during that situation. The trip went smoothly, and my friend and I left to return to our town around 8 o'clock p.m. The roads were mostly clear, and there were no weather-related issues. My father requested a text when we arrived home, and I agreed. My phone charger didn't fit in my friend's car, but his worked just fine. Unfortunately, my phone died about an hour and a half from my apartment. We got home around 4 a.m., and I went straight to bed. Less than 24 hours after leaving my father's house, I received 3 separate texts from him via Facebook Messenger while I was asleep. They were immediately aggressive in tone, expressing sentiments along the lines of, "You could be dead in a ditch. How dare you not update me? Now I have to worry. This isn't okay, child." I was immediately upset by the tone of his messages and decided to acknowledge him, letting him know I was safe and would pause the conversation until he calmed down. I informed him about my phone situation and reassured him that we had arrived safely and that I was alive. He then bombarded me with numerous questions about why I couldn't have charged my phone, how I was the passenger with the ability to text, called me careless, and questioned why I even made the trip. While I understood his concerns, I did not appreciate his tone. I told him he needed to stop speaking to me in that manner and that I did not want to have a conversation under those circumstances. His response was, "I'm your father. I deserve respect whether you like it or not," paired with, "You're lucky I'm not on my way over there right now." That crossed the line for me, and I chose to stay formal and brief in my responses to avoid an argument. My father had a troubled past, frequently in and out of jail throughout my childhood. We didn't speak for more than 10 years. He signed away his parental rights to escape the child support obligations he owed to my mother when I was about 9, after which I could choose when to see him. He engages in substance abuse, often going on cross-country trips while using hallucinogens, making reckless decisions without a second thought. When we resumed communication, he expressed uncertainty about whether I even viewed him as my father, acknowledging he didn't deserve that title. He assured me he would no longer impose on my life. I conveyed that while he is my father and I will always love him, he was correct that he didn't get to parent me. We reached an understanding. Now, however, he was acting entirely contrary to that agreement. After his last remark, I told him he could not punish me or speak to me that way. I refused to tolerate this behavior from him, stating that if he wanted to express his feelings, he could do so, but I would not accept being spoken to in such a condescending manner merely due to his anger. He then remarked that I disliked others disagreeing with me and accused me of lacking remorse for my actions. I never intended to cause my father worry. I comprehended his feelings and had previously communicated to him that I understood why he was upset. It made sense to me. I only objected to conversing with someone who treated me as if I were insubordinate. He insisted that I apologize before we could continue our discussion, to which I responded that he would not receive one until he recognized that he could not control me as he was attempting to. He could not parent me or make demands of me or threaten to show up unannounced to force a conversation. He attempted to call me multiple times, but I declined every call, as I did not want to speak to him while he was angry. I reiterated my boundaries, telling him we could talk the following day if he calmed down. Otherwise, we wouldn't communicate since his condition was an apology. I had no issue with apologizing to him. I simply refused to do so when I felt pressured. I would not allow him to think he had the capacity to treat me this way, as that seemed like a slippery slope I did not want to navigate. This morning, he sent another message, claiming it was unfair to be cut off the first time he expressed fatherly concern. He added that if I wanted to sever ties with him, I should just block him. I reiterated that I did not wish to burn any bridges. I just demanded to be treated properly, even if someone was upset with me. I insisted on respectful communication and explained that he did not have the right to punish or lecture me as a parent due to his absence. My father continued to say that I needed to stop portraying myself as a victim, labeling me entitled and questioning what was wrong with my generation. He claimed I deserved to be punished for my disrespect and expressed his belief that he had failed as a father. I told him he was being unreasonable and offered to have a phone call so he could hear my tone. I didn't want him to think I was being contemptuous when I told him he didn't have the right to treat me like a parent, though he could express concern and hurt as an individual. He declined the call. He reiterated in his final message that I meant nothing to him, announcing he had failed as a father and saying goodbye. I blocked him, but he immediately called my phone. I answered and told him that if he wanted to be respectful, we could have a conversation. Although I am unsure of everything he said, he immediately began hurling insults, so I hung up. I texted him that I would block his number as well if necessary. I declined 2 more calls, after which he left a message stating I needed to be slapped for my disrespect. He sent a text demanding I return a necklace he gave me that belonged to my grandmother after her passing, claiming he would return the spare key to my apartment only after I returned the necklace. He had previously visited my state while I was on vacation, during which I let him and his wife stay at my apartment to save on hotel costs. After his threats, I have decided to ask my landlord to change the locks and am contemplating going no contact with my father for the second time in about 6 years. I understand his frustrations and anxieties. I grasp the pain he must feel when reminded of his significant mistakes. I recognize he simply wants an apology. I would have been more than willing to offer one after some time had he not reacted explosively, but his subsequent actions and the tone he used have led me to believe I shouldn't keep him in my life. Am I overreacting? Story 2. Aita for kind of faking a friendship for years, and now wanting out of it. I, 31, female, met my friend Susan, 33, female, 6 years ago while we were both employed at the same company. I had just relocated to the city and didn't know anyone. She held a higher position than I did, and after I had been there for a few weeks, she invited me out for a drink. I thought it was nice of her, but she is a very different person than I am. I tend to be more introverted while she is extremely extroverted and enjoys being the center of attention. Shortly thereafter, she began telling everyone at the company that I was her new best friend. I felt incredibly awkward because I did not view her that way at all, but I was hesitant to correct her, so I went along with it. Before long, we formed a small friendship circle that included 2 other individuals with whom I became quite close during that time. However, our personalities frequently clashed, and our arguments became increasingly common. In my opinion, she was often very rude to others at work and to strangers. She perpetuated drama, but consistently blamed it on everyone else. Eventually, I felt drained. It seemed I could not maintain the constant fighting, and I couldn't escape the situation since I saw her at work every day and we were in the same friend group, which meant I saw her after work as well. Generally speaking, I am very conflict-averse, so it didn't take long for me to start biting my lip and refraining from expressing my true feelings or agreeing with her when I did not. Despite my attempts to keep the peace, we still fought occasionally. I increasingly felt as if she were trying to control my life. She wanted to spend all her time with me, frequently borrowed my clothes, called me constantly, and when we were in groups, she would get upset if I did not give her my full attention. At times, she would storm out of bars during nights out, or even left my birthday party once because I was chatting with other friends too much. She has a history of trauma related to friends leaving her, which I believe drives her to cling so tightly. It reached a point where I genuinely could not be around her any longer, and I considered quitting my job specifically because of her, not only because of her treatment of me, but also because she would scream at coworkers and cause others to cry at work. She did not fulfill her job responsibilities and was overall lazy in completing her tasks, often distracting me and encouraging me to slack off like she did. I did not want to see her every day anymore, as she filled me with anxiety. She, too, was thinking of quitting since she had been there longer than I had, and I thought that might be a blessing because I truly loved the job. It was just her I couldn't endure. However, she would not allow me to remain there, as she manipulated me into quitting by claiming she would only leave if I did. I certainly was not going to stay if she was still there. Thus, I quit, and not long after, COVID happened, prompting me to return home for nearly a year. This offered me much-needed breathing room. Although she insisted on maintaining regular contact, I was far enough away that I could ignore her messages. After the pandemic, I returned and regained my job, thinking it would be better to have more distance since we now had separate jobs and would only see each other occasionally. However, she always found a way to insert herself back into my life, particularly by getting overly involved with men I was dating, either starting fights with them while drunk or attempting to befriend them in hopes of winning their affection. She remains close friends with one of my past crushes even now. She has certainly cost me a few dates. Over the span of 6 years, there is too much to recount about what has transpired, but to summarize, she has lied about me and to me countless times, disclosed my secrets, and really has not supported me as much as she claims. The last few years have been challenging for me. My anxiety has soared, and my self-confidence has plummeted. I am finally starting to piece things back together, getting the help I need, and improving my situation. This time spent focusing on myself has made me reflect on this friendship. In recent years, I have felt as if I have been in a constant state of fight or flight, and the last thing I desired was to engage in another argument with her. As a result, I have grown increasingly complacent. I no longer share my honest opinions with her because, in every instance she complains about, I believe she is the one in the wrong, and I think she comes off as either self-centered or as a perpetual victim. Therefore, I typically listen to her stories, try to discern what she wants to hear, and echo that back. Additionally, I feel unable to share my life with her honestly since I do not trust her and worry about what she might share with others, so I constantly filter my stories. I simply do not trust her anymore. Simultaneously, I feel like her therapist. She only reaches out when she is experiencing difficulties, a new one every week, and will only ask about me after she has ranted for an hour. She often concludes by saying I am the only one who can make her feel better and expresses gratitude for how much better she feels after our conversations. I honestly have always felt worse afterward. I took this burden upon myself, believing I was a bad friend. I thought all of it was my fault, that I should have overcome her betrayals and been honest with my opinions instead of being a false friend. However, other friends have recently opened my eyes to how toxic and irrational she truly is. Although I have attempted to end this friendship after significant arguments in the past, I either end up guilt-tripped into staying or chicken out beforehand, anticipating the ensuing drama. I have relocated cities again in the last 2 years, which has been liberating. I feel as though I am free again, and I was hoping our friendship would simply fade away. Nevertheless, she has been quite persistent in reaching out regarding her struggles. She has been working on herself lately, and I began to hope this time she might change her toxic ways. I had not seen her in a long time and had ignored many of her messages, so when she informed me that her life was completely falling apart again, I asked to stay at her place while I was visiting our old city for a couple of days. While she appeared to be trying hard to be friendly, hospitable, and easygoing, as time passed, I began to notice her toxic behaviors resurfacing, namely, speaking poorly about people behind their backs, including our friends, and making negative remarks about a guy I had recently started seeing. We have had conflicts about him before. We had somewhat of a situationship for a couple of years, and he always felt like the one that got away. It seemed as though she was doing everything she could to dissuade me from pursuing him. She repeatedly told me that I had no self-worth if I chose to date him. While I understand a friend looking out for another, her extreme behavior suggested something unusual was at play. I suspected she might have a history with him that she does not want me to discover. When she realized I was not going to heed her advice about not seeing him, her tone shifted, and suddenly, she wanted to do things with both of us. This led me to believe she was merely attempting to re-establish a connection with me to become close with him, or to spread lies about me that would drive us apart so that she could keep me all to herself. It has brought back many memories I had suppressed regarding our friendship, and I genuinely cannot consider her a friend anymore. It feels more like a burdensome obligation. Although the past 6 years have not been entirely negative, we've had fun, laughed, and discovered common interests. I have not fully appreciated how much I have been treading on eggshells around her. I feel as if she is draining my energy and vitality. I want to end this friendship, but many friends advise me against it, knowing how volatile her reactions can be. I blame myself for allowing it to continue for so long. I should have expressed my feelings years ago and adhered to my previous discussions about ending our friendship. Now, it feels like it would be a shock to her. We haven't had an argument. I merely absorbed her negativity during my recent visit, and she believes we are still close friends. If anything, she has been reaching out to me more than ever, and I am uncertain how to proceed. I feel as though if we had an honest conversation about our relationship, and I voiced my need for distance or my desire for her to refrain from getting close to my boyfriend because I do not trust her, she would just manipulate me into maintaining the friendship with no changes occurring. That is why I feel I should block her and truly carve out my own space. What do you all think? Am I in the wrong for essentially pretending this friendship for so long and now wanting to exit? Story 3. My wife, F39, might leave me, M38, because she doesn't trust me. I don't know what to do. All names are fictional. I apologize for the lengthy post. I attempted to be concise, but I believe every detail is significant, and I am not in the right mindset to filter. My wife, Dana, age 39, and I, age 37, met in 2019. We married a little over a year later and have 2 children together, a 4-year-old boy and a 2-year-old girl. Here is the background on the primary issue. One of my closest friends is Haley, age 39. We met at university nearly 20 years ago and have maintained a close friendship since. Before I met Dana, I spent a great deal of time with Haley and her family, which at that time included her husband, age 41, and their daughter, who is around 8 years old now. They later expanded their family with another child. I formed a strong bond with Haley's daughter, and I became like an uncle to her, with no romantic interest ever arising between us. Before Dana and Haley met for the first time, some tension arose from Dana's side. She found it strange that I occasionally messaged Haley and questioned whether we had ever been involved. I honestly assured her that we had not, and there had never been any romantic feelings. I was merely eager to inform Haley about the woman I intended to marry one day. I thought the situation would blow over. When they finally met, everything seemed to go well, and I felt relieved. However, issues soon began to emerge. Prior to Christmas, we were invited to make mulled wine together. Haley's daughter instantly connected with Dana and invited her into her room for a pretend tea party. This is where I made a mistake. I went in to check on them and asked if everything was fine and if Dana was okay. She affirmed that all was well and that they were enjoying themselves. I said, "All right, let me know if you need anything. I am in the middle of preparing the mulled wine." After finishing the mulled wine with Haley and her husband, we all had dinner together. Apparently, Dana did not feel the situation was fine. She felt isolated with the child and was unhappy during the car ride home. I misread the situation entirely. This marked our first significant argument, and in retrospect, I should have noticed her feelings, but I did not. A few weeks later, we all celebrated New Year's together, which went smoothly. Following this, Haley became a very sensitive topic, and whenever her name came up, strong emotions arose on both sides, hers being hurt and mine being downcast and somewhat hopeless. Dana found it peculiar that I maintained a close friendship with Haley, largely because she felt unwelcome, but I suspect it was also due to the fact that Haley is a woman. I believe our relationship started on shaky ground and never fully recovered. Unsure of what to do, I chose to bury my head in the sand, hoping it was merely a phase that would resolve itself with time. Then COVID happened, and the world went into isolation. At this point, Dana and I were living together. Haley and I still communicated occasionally to share updates about our isolated lives, and Dana noticed those conversations, which led to comments. I stopped reaching out to Haley during this time, but continued to respond when she messaged me. In March 2020, we discovered that Dana was pregnant, which was something we planned. Our first child arrived in November. During the pregnancy, we met with Dana's family once in a COVID-safe manner outdoors. I would describe that gathering as a polite gesture from my wife, especially since we married at City Hall during the pregnancy. After our son was born, Haley visited with gifts for him, such as a personalized pillow and Christmas stockings for the entire family. That was the most recent time we saw one another. The following years were filled with sleep deprivation, severe back issues, including emergency surgery in my wife's home country, on my part, and an overall effort to adjust to family life. During this period, we occasionally received dinner invitations from Haley and her family, which I declined each time, explaining my various challenges to Dana afterward. This sometimes frustrated her, but I believed it was better to be honest than to conceal anything, which I communicated to Dana. She occasionally requested to see the invitations, which I showed her. In 2023, we welcomed our second child, a baby girl. Everything went well, and a few months later, I received a message from Haley stating they had welcomed their second child as well. I congratulated her and mentioned that we had also had our second child a few months earlier. We exchanged baby pictures, and that was that. I informed Dana about Haley's new baby, and she inquired whether we had remained in contact. I truthfully answered that this was our first communication since the last invitation. Then came what might be viewed as the climax of the situation. A year later, we received an invitation for an Easter gathering at Haley's home. I responded that we could not attend, which prompted the question, "What is happening?" This moment felt like it had reached a breaking point for me. I realized I could no longer hide behind weak excuses, so I candidly explained that, unfortunately, my marriage was incompatible with our friendship. This admission led to everything bubbling to the surface, and I sent her a long, apologetic message. I began to express some of my concerns to her, mentioning how I sometimes struggled to sleep because of how I had treated our friendship, and how I often felt a sense of hopelessness and lack of control over my life. She became somewhat concerned and responded with a lengthy message asking if I had anyone to talk to, assuring me that she understood. In my message, I emphasized my love for my wife and my choice to prioritize my marriage over our friendship. I also expressed regret that things had come to this point and acknowledged that my inaction was primarily to blame. I did not inform Dana about the invitation, nor did I mention that I had effectively ended the friendship following that conversation. I now viewed that chapter as closed, feeling as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. It was not a happy resolution, but it was an ending. Fast forward to the present, almost a year later. Out of the blue, Dana asked me whether I had been in contact with Haley recently, and I told her no. "I thought I saw her name in the Messenger app," she said. I responded that she must be mistaken. I showed her my messages, scrolling down quite a bit for her to see the last interaction. I mentioned, "There it is. We were invited to Easter almost a year ago, and I declined." She then pointed out that I had never mentioned that to her and asked to see my phone. I allowed her to look at it and briefly explained that I had ended the friendship at that juncture. She read through the entire conversation and felt betrayed that I had kept this from her. She then remarked, "What, you can't sleep because of her, just go to her." That night, she chose not to sleep in our bed, and the following morning, she removed the necklace I gave her on Valentine's Day along with her wedding ring. "There is nothing to discuss, the trust is gone," she stated. "Currently, it is challenging to have a conversation, and I find it difficult to articulate my side. This is our situation now, and it may very well be the end. I want to mend our marriage. I love her. All along, I have only wished to avoid conflict. I simply desire a peaceful life. However, I believe I have jeopardized it due to my tendency to leave issues unaddressed, hoping for a positive outcome. I plan to suggest couples therapy when she returns from work. I took a sick day today. I hope that therapy can help us repair our relationship, or, at the very least, enable us to co-parent effectively if that becomes necessary. I have proposed therapy during earlier disagreements, but she has consistently declined. In my country, there is a 6-month waiting period for divorces involving children, but I do not wish for a divorce. I am uncertain what steps to take next. I am worried about what will happen to our children. I love them deeply. I cannot bear the thought of them growing up in a fragmented household, feeling like they have no true home. I am filled with fear regarding the future at this moment. I do not know what the next steps should be. I feel devastated over this situation. What can I do to salvage this? How can I encourage her to communicate with me and listen? How can I ensure that the children do not feel caught in the middle? Story 4. Boyfriend, M24, replied to 3 texts initiated by X after I, F22, told him not to talk to her. I gave him a boundary, and he's followed it since and blocked her after that one time. Is this cheating? I have OCD. In brief, when my boyfriend and I first met, he was still recovering from a recent toxic breakup. We openly discussed his healing process. During the initial month, we spent significant time together, and he was convinced he had moved on. He was genuinely happy and didn't dwell on his past relationship. He occasionally shared stories about his ex and made some unintentional comparisons, all of which seemed to favor me. I, too, asked him a few questions because I was curious about what had gone wrong in their relationship. He maintained that those stories were just that, stories, and he felt no emotional connection to them, as he firmly believed he had moved on, even looking back. By the 2nd month, we began to argue frequently. He felt immense pressure from work and expressed that he was overwhelmed by various issues, including his feelings of missing his ex. When I inquired if that feeling was romantic, he gave a vague affirmative response, despite being in no contact with her. He clarified that it wasn't a choice he'd made, and that he had no desire to rekindle anything with her, acknowledging how unhealthy that relationship had been for him. He simply felt overwhelmed and wanted to move forward so he could focus on us long-term, especially since we were serious about each other. Admittedly, the arguments added to his stress, and he said it wasn't enjoyable anymore. We both recognized the need for a week to reset, with most of the conflicts originating from my side. I took his comments negatively and asked if he didn't like me anymore, to which he responded in a confused manner. However, he assured me he'd be back after clearing his head and confirmed our commitment as a couple during that week. He took a week of space, which I understood was not his choice, given that he had no intention of returning to her. He believed he had moved on, although he realized healing isn't a straightforward process. He needed the space to find closure, not to reconnect with her. After that week, we reunited, and I felt confident in his fidelity. He recognized that his need for closure was merely driven by curiosity about her life, devoid of any feelings. He mentioned that he congratulated her on a graduation post, which was the only time he had reached out, and their conversation was limited to discussing work-related topics. There was nothing flirtatious or suggestive in their exchanges, and he transparently shared all the conversations with me before we got back together. He clarified that he sought closure simply out of curiosity, not romantic interest. Apparently, she was contemplating moving back home if she didn't secure a job, and he felt compelled to understand her situation, which troubled him, prompting the need for space to fully let go of thoughts about her. I reminded him after our break to avoid contacting her, even casually. As months passed, we thrived together. He became more emotionally available and consistently put in significant effort, leading to our happiness. The long-distance phase ended soon after, and we found joy in our relationship. 3 months later, while looking through his phone, which he never hides, I came across messages from her and asked about them. He willingly handed me his phone and opened the conversation. She had texted him 3 times over the 4 months after our break, and he responded politely, with no flirtation or suggestiveness involved. Every time she reached out first. He did send her one meme referencing an inside joke between them, which was innocent, a harmless penguin meme implying a playful conflict, calling her that. Aside from that, he did not initiate any conversation. He merely responded to her inquiries about chair recommendations, his job, and other regular topics. I addressed it with him, and he expressed that he didn't perceive those brief exchanges as significant enough to warrant mentioning. He acknowledged it was a mistake to not inform me, especially considering I had asked him not to talk to her. I recognize that, as a principle, he refrains from ghosting anyone, even responding to job advertisements. He believes in complete trust and has no objections to my communication with my ex, although I choose not to engage in that. He has always been trustworthy and asserted that he had no feelings for her, seeing his closure purely as curiosity. He stated he did not desire friendship with her, but also did not want to be adversarial. If he genuinely wanted to communicate with her, he would have done so or would not have returned after our break. He maintained that while he didn't breach any boundaries, he still apologized and asked what actions would make me comfortable, indicating he would do them. I requested him to block her, and he agreed, stating that if it's what I need, he would comply. He expressed remorse for not mentioning the interactions and accepted that blocking her would be a consequence of his actions. However, before doing so, he sat me down to explain that cutting off individuals, especially without interpersonal issues, is significant for him. He would only block her because he recognized the reasoning and deemed her unimportant. He made it clear that he wouldn't cut off anyone else, stressing the need for total trust in him since he felt no wrongdoing had occurred. He prefers to remain polite toward exes, considering they are still people and their past issues have been resolved. He is not in contact with any other exes. He proceeded to block her after emphasizing it was a significant request, not due to her, but because of his principles. Nonetheless, he also reiterated that my comfort was more important than any principle, showing his willingness to prioritize my feelings but emphasized that I must trust him. Did he cheat by not telling me? Did he act wrongly? He is an honest and loyal person at heart, insisting that his feelings for her ended long ago, reiterating that he believed he had moved on before because he genuinely didn't think about it until it resurfaced during that overwhelming week. Prior to our break, he assured me he would never choose her again, given how she had negatively impacted him. Since blocking her, he has never mentioned her again. Our relationship is thriving now. I seek clarity on whether his actions constituted cheating. I struggle with obsessive-compulsive disorder and often feel anxious. He has shown me all correspondences, reaffirming that nothing flirty transpired. While the meme was unnecessary, it was just a playful reference. He called her a penguin, jokingly, and when she shared her life struggles, he remarked, "That's why there's one of you," which I found flirty, but he clarified he meant no one would want to deal with her difficulties. Thus, there was only one of her. He consistently acknowledges she is not a healthy person and states he would never return to her, regardless of the circumstances. I seek advice. Is it possible to maintain friendships with ex-partners? These thoughts linger, and I'm concerned I wasn't sufficient to help him fully heal or that he still harbors feelings for her, even if only curiosity. Furthermore, I grapple with the notion that he replied because he was unwilling to let her go. He has consistently affirmed his principles and intentions, but my obsessive-compulsive disorder complicates my feelings, especially since I previously asked about their shared history, and he expressed a wish for closure on the situation, not the person. He reassured me he does not want her whatsoever. Occasionally, he has conveyed thoughts about how time might have improved things had they given it a chance, which he expressed before our break. Since then, he has been attentive and present in our relationship. It has been a year, and while these issues persist, aside from our initial circumstances, he is genuinely the most loyal, caring, and warm individual. I need thoughtful advice, as people on platforms like Reddit often suggest ending relationships immediately. I hope someone reads my entire account and offers valuable insights because I truly love him. Story 5. I, a 21M, don't know what to do with my relationship with my GF, 21F. Some baseline context. We have been in a relationship for 3 years. Our relationship has experienced the highest highs and the lowest lows. Specifically regarding this situation, our relationship has not been at its best, and after a significant argument a month ago, we have not really communicated. In fact, she has not been speaking to me. Whenever she becomes upset with me or after a conflict, she blocks me on every form of communication, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Discord, Messenger, and stops sharing her location with me. I always have to request these things back when our relationship improves, but then the cycle repeats itself. Despite her silence, I always make it a point to email her, which is the only way I can contact her and keep her informed about my day. I make sure to share what I am doing and to check in on her, asking her about her activities. I have a good sense of her schedule, so whenever possible, I drive to her house to ensure she is home. If she is not there, I wait until I see her return safely. Additionally, I make it a point to visit her during my lunch breaks at work. Her workplace is 12 minutes from mine, so I can see her for a few minutes before heading back to drop off food. When I have free time and she is working, I also visit her to spend time with her during her 10-minute breaks and to see her in person. This has been the pattern for about a year and a half. We keep falling into this constant cycle of being good and then reverting to how I have described. Before Valentine's Day, I hadn't received any texts from her for a week, but I was doing the usual things mentioned earlier. We both worked on Valentine's Day, and she told me not to visit her at work during my lunch break. Despite her request, I wanted to see her, so I went anyway. She became really upset afterward, stating that she didn't want to post about me on Instagram because she didn't want her coworkers questioning the status of our relationship. She then blocked me again and left me to keep her updated via email. Fast forward to a couple of days later, she texts me saying she has Thursday free, suggesting we spend time together. However, I have my internship on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., and it requires a 2-hour commute, which takes up my entire day, making it impossible for us to see each other on those days. After I mentioned this, we began discussing our plans, but she ghosted me again. Fast forward to yesterday. My internship went remote due to plumbing issues at the office, and I took the opportunity to ask her if I could take her to school, which I usually do when I am free. I usually drive her to school, occupy myself during her classes, and pick her up afterward to ensure she arrives safely, considering it is a 40-minute commute, especially during rush hour for her night classes. I wasn't sure if she would respond, so I didn't get ready until she got back to me. She suggested that we study together and I take her to school. When I mentioned I was getting ready to leave, she became upset because I should have been ready in the first place, accusing me of wasting her time since she needed to study for an exam that same day. She erupted at me and then ghosted me again. Fast forward to today. I kept her updated and checked around 10:30 to see if she was home, attempting to get her to come outside. Eventually, she did, and she asked me to convince her why she should spend time with me tomorrow. During this conversation, I ended up crying and tried to hug her because we hadn't seen each other in so long. After about 10 minutes, she left, disappointed that I couldn't convince her to spend time with me. She then emailed me, and I will only include her responses here due to the lengthy nature of this post, but I believe you can understand the essence of my reply to her. You should have realized that me coming outside was your only chance to show me and convince me to go tomorrow, especially after everything that happened today and the past week. You wasted your opportunity to spend time with me tomorrow by doing nothing today. Don't give me excuses about wanting to hang out with me. You didn't even do everything possible today to convince me to go tomorrow. You always say, but it does matter. You have all the time in the world to prove otherwise. And no, I'm not just speaking about today or tonight. I told people I was single today. Are you happy? You're upset because you weren't able to get your act together tonight? Please, you couldn't get your act together 2 days ago, and now you're repeating the same mistakes. Honestly, there's nothing to be ashamed of. You don't have to desperately want to take advantage of a free day with me tomorrow. If you really wanted to, you would have shown me. How do I show you? If you truly want something, you'll go above and beyond and put effort into thinking of different options. Your mindset will naturally expand. The internet is literally at your fingertips. My time is valuable, and it's reasonable for me to dedicate my time to people who appreciate it. Our relationship has deteriorated to a casual friendship or acquaintance level. We occasionally communicate and catch up, but we both let our relationship fade some time ago. I'm exhausted from maintaining a false facade in front of others and lying to my close connections. This is for the best. If I were in your shoes, or if any guy had the opportunity to see his girlfriend, he wouldn't let himself squander that precious time. If a day like tomorrow arose, I would eagerly seize that opportunity and plan ahead to make it the best day possible. We haven't truly been together for a while. It has increasingly felt like a lie to myself, to us, and to those around me. You have never attempted to work things out with me ever. You only consider temporary solutions. You haven't taken anything from our experiences to lead our relationship forward. I understand you can't control your emotions, but it has happened too many times when you fail to prioritize what is essential. It's not solely about what is more important, it's about what is more efficient. For instance, you could have made the most of those 10 minutes before allowing yourself to cry. I don't have any more advice or words for you at this point. Have a good night. What do you think of this situation? Is this relationship beyond repair? Our lives are deeply intertwined, and I must admit that nearly everyone I know is connected to her in some way. I'm at a loss for what to do. Any advice would be appreciated. Edits, formatting.